You ever see an old beige PC in a thrift store and feel like you've stumbled onto the ruins of some forgotten kingdom? Like archaeologists are going to dust it off and say, ah, yes, this was the workstation of a 90s programmer. Notice the keyboard wear pattern from years of passive-aggressive typing. I always picture one in the wild, hunched over a tower case that sounded like a small jet engine about to give up on life. The programmer doesn't react, because the real danger wasn't noise. Their only natural predator was Windows 95 crashing during a compile. It didn't even attack from the front. It just waited until you were confident, and then lunged with a blue screen. And those monitors were so heavy, they basically counted as an upper body workout. You didn't rearrange your desk in the 90s. You attempted a personal Everest. To us, these people feel mythic, like they lived in harsher weather. Maybe that's why they get this aura of legend. But the real question is, what were they actually doing in there that made all the suffering worth it? Here's a fun fact. A 90s programmer could fit an entire graphics engine into 512 kilobytes. And not because they were showing off, because that was literally the space left after Doom shareware colonized the rest of the hard drive. Survival of the fittest, but for .exe files. Meanwhile, today we have apps that need half a gigabyte of RAM just to display a list. A list. Not even a fancy one. Just words in a vertical line. And we accept it. Like, yeah, that seems reasonable. My computer should wheeze like an asthmatic horse so I can check my grocery notes. Back then, if you wanted a list, you basically handed your code to the GPU equivalent of a kazoo and said, here, make this look like something. And it did. Sort of, if you squinted. And comments in code? They avoided those. Not because comments slowed anything down, but because memory was reserved for the important things in life, like solitaire assets, or whatever mystical pixel had to render the Minesweeper smiley face. All these constraints built a certain personality, a mindset, one that started to form a whole culture around how much just barely enough someone could endure. Sometimes I try to fix something tiny on my computer, like a Chrome extension that insists on breaking every other Tuesday. And after 10 minutes, I'm ready to renounce technology and live in the woods. Then I imagine telling that story to a 90s programmer. Someone who once debugged assembly at 3 a.m. because the office printer woke up in a weird mood and decided the number 4 was illegal. These were people who bragged on forums about writing entire subsystems in hex for fun. Just casual recreational pain. Like digital CrossFit, except instead of lifting tires, you're lifting your own sanity. And then there's the iconic example. Linus Torvalds building Linux in his bedroom. People talk about it like it's this epic achievement, but I always picture it as a totally normal teenage hobby. Some kids collected baseball cards. He collected kernel crashes. The thing is, all this suffering didn't just toughen them up. It rewired them. It gave them this quiet, unshakable pride. Because once you've survived a pointer error that corrupts your boot sector, regular human problems just don't hit the same. And the wild part is, they didn't just survive the chaos of their machines. They kind of created their own. There was a time, an actual historical period, when every program on your computer just automatically ran as administrator. Everything. Even Minesweeper had the authority to ruin your day. At a system level, you opened that game and you were basically handing root access to a pile of gray squares. And if you knew how to edit autoexec.bat, congratulations, you held the destructive force of a small sun. You could make your machine boot faster, or slower, or not at all, depending on whether you sneezed mid-keystroke. Viruses spread everywhere back then, partly because security was a lawless wasteland, but also because people would download .exe attachments just to see what happened. Not even out of curiosity, more like scientific commitment. Like, if gravity works, this file should either open a cat picture or erase my hard drive. Let's find out. It was an era of absolute freedom, which is also an era of absolute chaos. And that chaos shaped them. Meanwhile, we're over here with tools and permissions and guardrails designed to keep us from bricking our laptops while renaming a folder. And those guardrails didn't just change our machines. They changed us. Here's a question I ask myself sometimes. When did troubleshooting become typing an error message into Google like it's a confession? Junior devs today don't debug. They just paste the entire stack trace into a search bar and hope Stack Overflow forgives their sins. Then you've got mid-level developers. These are the folks who can build a whole product out of NPM packages last updated during the Bronze Age. Half the dependencies are abandoned. One of them is maintained by a guy named Dave who hasn't been online since 2017. But it all works, mostly, if you don't breathe on it. And standing above them, like wise elders who have transcended earthly struggle, are senior developers. Their main technical skill is remembering which Slack channel to mute so they can pretend the build pipeline is someone else's problem. They don't even touch the code anymore. They just materialize during meetings to say, "Have we considered caching?" and then vanish again. It's not that modern devs are lazy. We're just padded, bubble-wrapped, living in an ecosystem designed to protect us from the exact kinds of disasters that gave 90s programmers their mythic glow. Which raises the real question, were they legendary? Or did their environment just create better stories? Picture an archaeologist in the year 2400 dusting off an old AWS invoice and concluding, "We worshipped a sky god called the Cloud, who occasionally smote entire regions for reasons known only to itself." That's basically how future generations will see us. 90s programmers, though they got their legend the classic way, by surviving things no one should have survived. Dial-up modems that screamed like they were summoning spirits. Power outages that struck the moment you forgot to save. Software installs that required 3 floppy disks and the emotional resilience of a mountain goat. It's not that they were superhuman. It's that their daily environment made everything feel like a heroic quest. Meanwhile, our environment gives us Jira tickets with titles like, "Fix alignment of button on mobile." No one's building a mythos out of that. Honestly, if most modern devs had to code in MS-DOS for a single day, we'd all immediately pivot to pottery or woodworking, something wholesome, where the only thing that crashes is your confidence. But that's the point. Their world produced legends. Ours produces task boards. And maybe somewhere in between is where the truth actually lives.